So as we start Missions Week, a week where we want to, even more so than normal, think as a church about our country, our city, our country, the nations. We're excited to have all of the Thurmans here today. There's several things we hope that you accomplish today. One, we want to hear updates from Overland, learn how to pray more specifically for them. Be challenged to think about what your life looks like to live life on mission. Church planting, the nations, taking the gospel is not just for special people called to be church planters. It's for each of us. So we all have a responsibility to play in that, and you have done just a fantastic job of holding the rope for so many of our missions partners. We want to encourage you for all of us to keep striving to do that better. Many of you have been to Fort Collins, have been to their church, been able to worship with them, been on mission trips, and if you have, you've gotten one of these t-shirts before. But if you don't have one of these, they brought several today, and you can pick one of those up at the Resource Center. It's a great way to just remember Overland. I know many of you in here always want more t-shirts because I get emails, so here's one for you. Be sure to go get that. But we're just thankful to have Zack and Jen and the boys here today. So Zack, why don't you come on up, man? We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you. Man, it is good to be here. I mean, it is good to be with our Buck Run family this morning. I'll be honest, I'm a little impressed with my brain this morning. Because I know so many names of people having pastored in multiple locations, and they're just coming back to me this morning, and I'm like, it's like I just saw you yesterday, and so man, we're just pumped to be here this morning. I want you to open up your Bibles to 3 John, and so into the Bible, 1st, 2nd, 3 John. It is a just one chapter. You know, it's always kind of awkward when you're like, turn to 3 John chapter 1. It's just the chapter. There's no chapter 2. It's just chapter 1. This is a letter written by John the Apostle, the beloved. Remember, this is the disciple whom Jesus loved and cared for so deeply. And you see John when he speaks to others with the same love and care. And so he's writing to Gaius. And he's an elder of a church. And we don't know a ton about that church. But I want you to look starting in verse 5. This is what it says. Beloved, it's a fruitful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testified to your love before the church. You do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. For they've gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. I want you to look at verse 6 and kind of zoom in on the end of 6. He says, you do well to send them on a journey, and listen to that statement, in a manner worthy of God. I'll just tell you, I think if John were writing a letter to Buck Run and he were to talk to you about how you sent us, he would tell you, good job. You sent them in a manner worthy of God. And I want to spend some time this morning just commending you for the way in which you have loved and cared for us and sent us. You know, when you plant a church, here's the reality. Churches plant churches. We planted a church with the North American Mission Board. They have a network. It's called the SEND Network. Notice how hard it is for me to say SEND. My accent makes it sound like SEND Network, which is always really confusing to people. Like a SEND Network? What type of guys are you? No, SEND Network. We are sent people. And we planted with that network. And what that network does for church planters is it trains them. It helps to equip them. We cooperate together. We get encouraged and edified together. But the network doesn't plant churches. Churches plant churches. A ton of church planting that happens in places like this, we call them church plants, but they're really not church plants. They're church splits. You know what I'm talking about? You'll see that. That's been the history of church planting in the South in the last 50 years. It's like there's a division, and so they get in a fight and they leave, and one pastor leaves and he takes some people with him and they start another church. In the past, maybe 20 years, it's looked a little different. It's in the world of student pastors, youth pastors. Youth pastor gets to the spot and he's like, you know what, I'm not getting the respect I deserve. I'm going to go start my own church. And so they go and start another church. And a lot of times the pastor is really insecure about it and doesn't want to help them and doesn't even like it and doesn't really believe that the youth pastor should be planting a church. So it's like, I'm not sending anybody with you. I'm not helping you support it. Go do that on your own. It's not what happened here. What happened here is you guys sent us. We were a sent people. You blessed us on our way out. By the way, I would just say, and I'm going to talk about this some of my sermons, so I don't want to take too much of my sermon material, but we loved Buck Run, and we didn't want to leave Buck Run. We felt a very clear call of God to go plant somewhere else, right? So that's what happened. So when Dr. York stood up here and announced to the church our first Sunday in this building. Our first Sunday, you remember that? It was the soft launch, I believe is what you're calling it. It's pre-grand opening. The only time Herschel ever told you, hey, don't invite anybody to church this week. You remember that? And we stood up there that day and said, this is what the Lord has on our heart. This is what we're being called to do. In that process, Herschel said, hey, we want to send people with them. We want to send our best and our brightest with you. And somehow Buddy Sampson and his family ended up going, so I'm not sure that was the best and the brightest. But nonetheless, some others went. I see Rich Kemper in the room back there. Rich was a part of our team. The Lord used Rich in a great way, and he didn't sleep for about 3 years. You hear my boys did the boom snap. I'm going to tell on them. This is what our college students do. Instead of clapping or saying amen, they do this. Have no clue why. Still haven't figured out. To me, it's like they're dipping snuff and they're like packing the can. I'm like, you guys aren't rednecks, you're hippies. You don't dip snuff anyway. Rich, you're loved, you're missed. We're thankful that the Lord chose to pull you out of here for a season and use you so greatly with us. But Herschel said, hey, I want to send some people. But he also said this. He said, I want you to help support them. And so your sending church is a church that is your main support network. And then you have other supporting churches. Like, it's expensive to plant churches. It's expensive to do the kind of things it does to take and reach and plant a church. So you've got other supporting churches. So let me give you an instance of that. Daniel Broyles, who used to be one of our staff pastors here many, many years ago. Daniel's at a church in East Tennessee called Tri-Cities Baptist Church. Matter of fact, that's where you guys got Will Morris. Oh my gosh, check this out. I just put this together. Will's on staff here. I leave here and go to Fort Collins. While in Fort Collins, you guys send me Justin Ray. Y'all remember? Anybody remember Justin Ray? He's a little skinny thing about this big. Hair weighs more than his body. Justin was on staff with us and ended up at a church in Florida. Somewhere along the way, Daniel calls me and says, hey, do you know anybody that could be my student pastor? And so now Justin is on staff at Tri-Cities. Meanwhile, I just hired a guy from Tri-Cities to be on my staff in Colorado. So, man, you see this gospel partnership, man. It's incredible. But anyway, you have supporting churches. So they support us, and their staff reaches out to us and that kind of thing. They love us, and they care for us. They send us money. They send us mission teams. But their people don't text me. Their people don't call us. Their people don't stop by when they're out that way and take us to dinner. You know who does that? You guys do that. You guys gave and still give individually. We have people from this church who till this day send $100, $200 a month, some $20 a month, but help fund the mission work that we're doing. You guys sent us in a manner worthy of God. You guys loved us, cared for us, have checked on us, have kept us lifted up. You know, I often tell people that our church is built on the backs of little old ladies' prayers. Now, nobody get offended that I said that. We have a lot of people in WMUs. Man, I love the WMU. I know you don't have a WMU, but man, there's still WMUs exist, and they reach out and they pray to us. I get on prayer calls with WMU ladies. But this is what I know. There were some women in this church, Kathy Casey being one of them, Marcia, Mary. This is women who have just kept us in prayer before God, have just loved us and lifted us up and have prayed for the work, and the Lord has answered those prayers. And so again, I say all this to say, you guys sent us in a manner worthy of God. And that I say all of that even before I bring up Scott and Chris and Herschel and how they've loved us. And you're not going to believe this, but Herschel doesn't call me very often. I know, shocking. But when he does call me, it's always at the right time. And I don't know how he does it, but when he calls me, it's always at the right time. And I'll tell you another thing. Anytime I've ever called Herschel, Chris, or Scott, they pick up and answer the phone. And they're always there. And so the staff has cared for us. We feel love. You guys sent us in a manner worthy of God. And so what I want to do this morning is I want you to see a glimpse of your heavenly ROI, your heavenly return on investment. Because the reality is, because you sent, and the gospel was proclaimed for the sake of the name of Christ, and we worked in the truth and we labored in the truth, you're going to see the return on your investment. What you did, what you've given, what you've done was not in vain. First, I want to say this. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, there's a little discussion going on in the church at Corinth, and Paul says this to them. What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages according to his labor, for we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. And so before I even talk about what has happened at Overland and all the ways, all the successes that we've seen in our kind of humanly eyes, I would just look at it this way. You guys sent us, and we planted, and we've watered, but God's the one who gave the growth. Anything I say today, I want you to understand this isn't us going, hey, we did this. We didn't do jack. That's just the reality. The Lord has so abundantly poured out His blessings. There's so many God stories, so many stories that we're going to tell today and in the sermon that, like, literally, it's the Lord's moving and working, and if He wasn't going to use us, He was going to use somebody else. So this is. I just want to put that out there to say, man, this is the Lord who gives the growth. It's the Lord who's done that. In church planning, one of the ways that people ask me this question: when is a church planted? When do we say it's a church plant? You guys, your church is 5.5 years old. Is it a church plant? And I would be honest, and I would just say, no, it's not. We're a planted church. Well, what makes you say that? Is it because you're financially independent, meaning you can survive off of outside sources? And I would tell you that we couldn't do ministry the way that we're doing it and to the level that we're doing it and have the reach that we're doing it. But if we had to scale back, we could survive, we could stay afloat on our internal giving. Man, some of that looks like very faithful laborers. It looks like a whole lot of college students giving $32.79 a month. And I throw out that $32.79. That's how you know they're tithing. Like when you see dollar amounts come in, and it's like somebody gives $27.32, you're like, that's a tithe. That's not random. Somebody made $270. And so, man, it's a lot of college students, but it's beautiful to see. So is it that? Well, that's part of it. Is it because you have a building? Well, we had a building from day one. Guess what? Buildings don't make churches. They absolutely don't. Churches are made up of the people. Buildings don't make churches. I'll tell you, it's this. I believe it's when you get to a place where it no longer needs the church planter to live. So if I got hit by a bus today, no chance of that because there's no buses here on Sundays. But if I were to get hit by a bus today, it would make it. It would live. It would live without us. It doesn't need us to be there anymore. Why doesn't it need us? Because it's got a group of leaders, elders, if you will, who are running things and taking care of things, and they can be there. I'm not there today, and I don't have to think a thing about, hey, is church going to go well today? I can be away from church and know that, man, it's going to go smoothly, and if I died, it's still good to go. So I'm going to ask my lovely wife to come up and begin as we just start sharing what a morning at Overland Church would look like this morning. This is my lovely wife, Jennifer. You know, somebody said, I'd like to go talk to Jennifer, but I know I'll never get to her. The line will be too long. Her line would be longer than mine because she is a wonderful partner in ministry, but she's just a wonderful lover and carer of people. And she's loved at our church. She's loved in our community. When you're out in our community, there is likely to know her name and her ministry as they are of mine and our ministry at Overland. They go together. She is a wonderful wife. She's a wonderful mother. Boom snap. All right. They adore her and they dog me. So anyway, Jennifer's going to kind of help share what stuff would look like this morning. So if I were to pull up at Overland this morning, I'm going to pull into, it depends what time, but assuming I pull in right on time, like service starts at 9, I'm pulling in at 9 o'clock. What's going to happen?
So if you pull in at 9 o'clock, the parking lot will be filling up, and we have a greeting team that's made up of just people that have gathered from our community that have come to Overland. Though it'll be buzzing with energy. There'll be college students that are on greeting team, other people that will greet you in the parking lot, at the door. You're going to interrupt me.
I am. You just said something that made me think of, remember that time when the college students were out front and they were doing like a tunnel to greeters when they're running them in?
Not for
and they're like
basketball.
cheering them on, and it's like a tunnel. And I'm like, gosh, you can't do that.
That's true, but they can. It didn't matter. We have hospitality. We have what we call a lodge, which would be like a fellowship hall, but it's really just a lodge. And it looks sort of like a lodge. We have donuts.
How about that? How about that? We got donuts
and coffee.
And coffee. Y'all had any donuts lately?
Which is really kind of served to gather people. It really kind of changed the dynamic of being able to greet people, which is why it does cost a lot of money though.
That's right. It costs a lot of money. It
but
makes a mess.
So we have hospitality. We have our worship band, tech. A lot of people serve in these areas. We've outgrown our building. I think you've probably heard that. We've talked about that. We have kids and students, college students. It's just a lot going on. Our people like to, the community, having community is a really big value. It's very family centric. And even with college students, they like to they'll hang around, they'll They don't come early necessarily, but they do like to hang around and they like to talk. And so people will gather in the lodge so that they can just have community with one another.
So if you come at the 10:30 service at that point, we when we first inherited this building, we had to add 30 parking spaces, which was a massive expense because of improvement that had to be due to the property for drainage issues. And we added those 30, and the very first Sunday we filled that up. And now, if you look at our piece of property, it's 5 acres, and we have a row of cars that essentially double row runs all the way to the back. Maybe it goes 80% back. And so people are parking on dirt, something that's not intended to be parking lot. As a matter of fact, we can't put gravel down. We just have to park in the grass. That works out well. This time of the year, summer, it works out well, but guess what's about to happen? It's going to start snowing. And as long as it snows and it's cold, it's still not a problem because people, it doesn't matter. The snow's going to pack down. The ground's going to be hard. What becomes a problem is what we call the mud season. And so in February, March, April, it just becomes a mud bath, right? It's just mud everywhere. So it's a problem. Like we've got more people than parking spaces. You're going to come in. The building is just super tight at this point. People are walking on top of each other. Our worship center is pretty small, and so we've got it fits like 140 chairs. That's what you should have in there. 140. We have 192, and so it's packed. You're on top of each other. At Easter last year, in our last service, we did 3 services. At the last service, there were 10 more people in the room than there were chairs. And people were like, how did you do that? I'm like, well, college students, because college students don't care. They'll sit on top of each other. There's 10 in a row. They'll put 12. They don't care. Babies in laps. They'll go everywhere. A few Sundays ago, I think September 11th, maybe. Wouldn't have been then. Anyway, in September, one of those services, we had 411 on Sunday morning. Everybody there, and one of the services, there's only 10 chairs, 10 spots open. So that's pretty incredible. So when she says it's tight, it's tight. It's not tight every Sunday, but it's often just very, very tight. Talk about our kids.
So from the beginning, we always had a lot of kids because our core team that went with us had a lot of kids. So we started with a lot of kids, and so you attract what you have, and so you reach the demographic of what probably your kids are, which is what Durango is doing. That's why they started a student ministry, because that's the age of their kids. And so that's what we did in Fort Collins. So we already started with a lot of kids, but then it just, we attracted a lot of families, and so, at this point, it's... It's kind of absurd.
70 to 80 go back.
Yeah, 70 to 80 kids go back, which is a lot for us. And then our kids have grown up, as you can see, and so we have a lot of students. And so just depending on, the Sunday, we'll have a lot of students back there because they've all grown, and then they attract more students. And so we've just reached families, we reached single people, it's just really remarkable, the people that we've reached. People from other churches come, but then also we just reach people in the community. And that's just kind of the demographic. It's just amazing to see on a Sunday morning. You would think that when you look at the demographic of our church, every Sunday we have visitors, which is what's so interesting about the lodge and hospitality, because just last Sunday, there were 3 sets of new people there. There was a gentleman who had never been to, he's like, I haven't been to church in a long time. And that's usually people's story. And he just is in our lodge. He just came to church. And you're like, wow, how did that happen? He just came, right? And that doesn't happen, we know. Like, you have good theology here. And so he's there. And then there were 2 other women who, there's a transitional house that backs up. to our church property, and it's for women who have been in jail, and then they go to court, and when they get out of jail, and they put them in that house essentially, and they will just come to our church, and they're standing there in our lodge eating a donut, drinking a cup of coffee, and they're like, yeah, your church is our backyard. And so there they are. But then we'll have families, we'll have cardiologists. I mean, this just runs the gamut. And so it's just really, that's just the buzz when he's talking about it. Like there's this excitement and expectation of what is God going to do today?
He's all like, you go to church thinking, you just have no clue what's going to happen, but something's going to happen.
Right.
Last Sunday, she brings up those women. I was preaching the end of Ruth 4. And so I had been preaching through the book of Ruth. We get to the end of Ruth 4. And in Ruth 4, if you'll remember, you've got Tamar. Tamar, who her story of how Judah and Tamar had Perez was she had like tricked her father-in-law into this incestuous relationship. And it's like shady lady kind of stuff. But he was the real one who was absolutely corrupt. And so are his sons, and you got the Levirate marriage, and so it's like really messy. And then you get on down in there, and you realize when you read Matthew chapter 1 that Boaz's mom was Rahab, a prostitute. And so then you're like walking through that, and you're showing like our lives are messy, and God is able to save and use anyone. And then what happens? But these women who come in with incredibly messy lives, have probably been to jail, right? Have had some sort of addiction for sure, walk in and hear that message of redemption. Now, did we, like I pointed out, God's doing the work. We didn't invite them. We didn't do anything. They showed up.
Yeah, people often say, because there's this other girl who's been coming, and pretty similar story. You know, she has struggled with addiction to drugs, and she came to our church, and I said, well, what made you come? And she goes, well, I've just been driving past your church, and I just see so much going on. That's the buzz, right? And she said, so I decided to come. And so it's just incredible that the Lord has, one, given us the property that he's given us, and we have outgrown it. And so, but two, that he gave it to us where it was, right? And the Lord is intentional and strategic in doing that, and that so we've attracted families, that are, some are upper middle class, I would say. And so you have cardiology, you have all these businessmen. I mean, people are, they go ski, they do all these things. But then he's given us these other people who are very far from Christ. And they drive past our church every day because it sits on a very busy street in Fort Collins. I mean, I don't know how many cars drive past our church. And they drive past on a Sunday morning, and they drive past on a Wednesday. I mean, and our kids even kind of noted that there's always some car, and usually it's the city or somebody parking in our parking lot, but they drive past our church and they see something happening. And it's just such a gift of the Lord. And these people are desperate. And it's like a beacon of light. And then they go, I'm going to go there because something's happening.
Share her story, because share it.
So she's young, and she has a son. He's in 5th grade, and she comes to our church and gets connected to some of our college students and goes to one of their community groups. But she's a little bit older than they are, and they connect her to me, and she comes to my Bible study, and she's sitting in my Bible study, and she's done every drug you can imagine, and at this point, she's lost her job. She's had a DUI, so she's really scared. CPS has been called for her son, and so it's kind of like triage for us because we want to help her keep her son. And so she's talking to me, and basically I just said, she's like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? And I said, well, actually it does, because you're sitting in my house at a Bible study. And so I shared the gospel with her, and she's crying, and I'm like, you want to start on this journey, and she does, and she's talking to me about baptism, and she's been coming ever since. But long story short, I think for her, what the Lord is doing in her life is transforming her and bringing her out of this like generational cycle of drug addiction and abuse. And even like her son comes to, it's a cool story because her son comes with her to the Bible study, and it's a women's Bible study. But he sits at the table with her, and he's hearing the truth. I mean, it's really remarkable. And he's hearing and participating in the study along with her, as the Lord is doing the work that he's doing in her life. And that she's gotten a job now. And CPS.
She was this close to losing her kid.
Yes, she was, but she's not.
So that's the kind of thing, from the college students to the adult, like it's just all over the place. Not any one story is alike. And man, the Lord has been kind to us to, we pray the Luke 10:2 prayer every day at 10:02. Buddy and I have been doing this for years, other people as well. The Lord of the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Pray to the Lord of the harvest that they'll send laborers into the field. And when we sent Overland to Durango, I'm going to talk about that just in a second. We sent close to 30 people. There are close to 30, like I don't know if it's like 28 or 29 people who used to be at Overland Fort Collins who now worship at Overland Durango. A lot of those are kids. A lot of those kids are living as missionaries. I would tell you that. But when we sent them out in a smaller church, you've got to think. At the time we sent them, we were a little over 200 people, right about 200 people. So, you're talking, what is that? I don't know, somebody's good at math. Is that 15%? I don't know what it is. You're sending a chunk. Well, the next week, guess what? There's more people. They're back. Like that wasn't there. The problem was we sent out our leaders. And so what happened is it created a leadership deficit at our church. And this is probably one of the best things that has happened at our church. Is because of that leadership deficit, we started something called the Servant Leadership Cohort. We already have what we call our servant leader pipeline. We have a pipeline, and we can show you every volunteer, every leader, every director, senior leadership, and kind of where they fall and who they answer to, and the goal is to move people up that pipeline. So from coming off the streets to coming to Christ, to being baptized, to being discipled, to be servant leaders, because we want to multiply churches. We're going to have multiply leaders. And so we started this servant leadership cohort last year, and it is how we will train church plants to send for the future. It's been this really beautiful thing, but in that we still needed to add staff members. I mentioned hiring a pastor from Tri-Cities. His name's Chase Bartlett. Chase just came on in August to be our next gen pastor. So he has now kids, birth, all the way up to 12th grade. And then that makes about 120 people that he's kind of in charge of. 120 people, and then a whole bunch of volunteers that he's in charge of. We also brought on staff a guy his name's Joshua Hutchins. He's actually a PhD from Southern Seminary. He and I went to college together at Boyce College way back in the day. We started August of 2004 together. He's been on the mission field in Malawi, Africa. And if you've ever seen pictures, if you're friends with me on Facebook and you've seen the trips that I've done to Malawi, I was with him. I was going with him to do missions. His family, just because of some stuff within their family, they needed to come off the mission field. And he was supposed to go be a professor at a university. And the Lord's hand would rather have him come to us. And so through much prayer, we ended up with Josh. He is going to take the servant leadership cohort that we're going to continue to do. And then we're going to, on the back end of it, put an institute. I'm going to use the word institute because I know you guys are doing that here. The same sort of level of classes. But then we're going to do a seminary extension campus at our church. And so our plan is to start a seminary extension campus in 2026. And so he's talking to several seminaries trying to figure out how we're going to do that. But this is all part of raising up laborers, because we can't just plant one. What we've realized is we can't just send a team to Durango and think we're going to backfill, and we've got to send them prepared. So let me talk. You want to talk about Durango real quick?
Yes. So Durango, I'm sure you guys have heard. I think Buddy's probably been here, but it's done amazingly. They went with a team of nearly 30 people, and most of those people had been a part of church planning, so their kids were students and were very intentional. And then they had Buddy, who is Buddy, and so Durango is a different area. It's not like Fort Collins, so it's small. It's smaller, but the Lord has gone before them, obviously, and has blessed that work. And so they are currently meeting on Fort Lewis's campus, which is college there. It's a small college, but they are reaching college students because they are meeting there. So college students can just walk, which is easy for college students. I think they are running about 130.
130 to 150. The largest some of these have is 175.
Yeah.
So unheard of for that young of a church plant.
Yeah, so
they should be about 40 or 50.
Yeah, but the Lord is definitely blessing their work, and there's a potential merger. It's a very similar story to ours, where there's a church, an SBC church in Durango that is essentially dying. Its membership is shrinking, and there's a potential merger for them, which would be, I think, a good thing for them, and that it's potential that it would happen. It would look differently than it did for us. We gained the property and the building and one member at Southside in Fort Collins, because the other members of Southside had moved out of the community, but that would not be the case for them. They would actually gain more members.
Like 12 people.
And an elder, and the pastor is younger. And that would actually benefit them, though, because they would need some of that help. So the Lord is blessing that work and their faithfulness. I mean, they've been very intentional. They've reached students. I think the FCA is one of the largest in the state. So
they're all of their leadership team is involved in the FCA at Durango High School.
Yes. They are having their membership meetings and
first family meeting
tonight. So the Lord is blessing the work. It's really
modeled after what we did here. And then we did it in Fort Collins.
Yeah, and now they're doing
it. And so they just missed the memo. We typically do our family meetings the same day you guys do your family meetings. And typically.
Yeah, he's just being a little rogue.
It's
shocking.
Yeah, I know, right? And so tonight they'll talk about that. On November the 3rd, that church, it's called Parkside Church, will vote on whether to give them their building.
But people are coming to faith. I mean, they're baptizing people. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, the Lord is really, that's the remarkable thing. Like, they're baptizing people. People are getting saved and moving from darkness to light. That's what's remarkable, right? I mean, the Lord wanted a church there, and they went, and he's planting it, and people are getting saved, and praise the Lord.
Yep. Praise the Lord. 8 hours away from us. That's not true. Whatever. I don't know how long. I don't know how far it is. It says 6.5 on Google, but it takes 8. So
it's over the mountains.
It's over the mountains, and Colorado is a big state, and there are like really isolated places. They're one of the only places in America that's like 5 hours or 4 hours from an interstate. So like it's even hard to get places. It's very kind of put off in the corner by itself. And so, but yet the Lord wanted a church there, and he made it very clear to us that he wanted a church there, and we're seeing the fruit of it. So you have to ask the question. So we're talking about all these things. So what's the secret sauce? What did you guys do? What makes you different than other church plants? By the way, I'm going to mention this in my sermon, but there were 4 other church plants in Fort Collins when we moved there. None of them exist anymore. They've all died. Several have been planted after in northern Colorado. 3 of those have died. And so it's a church planting graveyard. It actually has some of the worst statistics in the West for church success. It's a church planting graveyard. So what's the secret sauce? Well, the secret sauce is just faithfulness. It's the faithfulness of the Lord, to see his kind hand in it, that he chose to do it. But our strategy has been proclaim the gospel, make disciples, serve other people, and multiply. Proclaim, disciple, serve. We've gone in and said, we're going to glorify God by proclaiming Jesus Christ, and we're going to do that within personal evangelism and missional living. We're going to do it from the pulpit. But that is what God has done. We've said, okay, we're going to make disciples, but guess what? Nobody knows how to make disciples. So we're going to make disciples, and we've got to teach them how to make disciples, and so that there's multiplication happening. The disciples are making disciples. It's not just Jennifer and I that are doing this work. There is an army of people who are now doing this work. We're going to, I mentioned our servant leadership pipeline that's part of discipleship. We're going to raise up leaders. We're going to multiply leaders, and then we're going to serve the community. Will you speak real quickly just to how you've led our church within that part of missions and serving locally in our community?
So we partner with an organization called Serve 68, which is just they are most churches in Fort Collins will partner with them to do outreach. We do Thanksgiving outreaches and Christmas outreaches, and if someone has, it's like you can do benevolence through them, and so that's one way that we'll do Thanksgiving food box distributions, and people come to our church and we'll just have a big distribution event, and that's a way to connect with people who are vulnerable. And we also do toy distribution at Christmas, and so I kind of head that up. And so those have been from the very beginning. Some of the ways that we've done local outreach, and one of the ways that we've really found favor with our community is by doing that, and that's one of the ways that we have connected with our local schools is through that outreach, is because by doing that we realized that a lot of the people who lived around us or near us were non-native English speakers, and we started offering English as a second language classes at our church, and we've been doing that, I don't know how long,
A
while. And when we started doing that, I think there were 1 or 2 other churches that were doing that, and then the community college did it, and they did it through a grant, but they lost their grant this year. I'm sure they'll write another one and try to get it. But when we started doing that, we would send flyers out to the local schools system and say, we're offering this, and the school would send all we did it for adults, and they would send their parents to us. And I just worked really hard to build a connection with the liaisons, the family liaisons. And through that, what has happened this year is something really special. The Lord has opened a door for us that the school system actually reached out to us and said, the community college is not offering any services to us anymore, but we want you to come into the school and do classes for us. And they know we're a church. And so they, clubs offering extracurricular activities through our school system is pretty kind of squirrely just because of how it works. They don't mind about their type of clubs, but if you offer any other kind of type of club, you have to go through all of these bells and whistles.
Code meaning if you want to have a club about changing your gender, that's fine.
Right.
But you better not talk about changing your heart. You better not talk about Jesus.
So it's called Language Club. And so there's a school that sits in the church's backyard, basically. And it's one of the schools that we do Thanksgiving and toy distribution outreach with. And we've taken backpacks too with school supplies and things like that. And so they reached out to us and said, will you come we're going to offer a language club to struggling children who are language learners. Will you offer it for parents? And we're going to open it up to every parent, not just to the parents of those kids. And so I said, okay, I'll try. We'll see what we can do. It's 5 days a week. And so I prayed and asked the Lord to give me volunteers, and we got volunteers. And so we've been doing it for a couple of months, and they want us to do it at multiple schools now. And they know we're a church, and they don't care. And they're just like, we're so glad you're here.
They're so desperate.
Yeah, they're so desperate for the help, I guess.
So Jennifer and her team are there 5 days a week, 7:45.
Yeah, it's before school, with adults, just doing language learning. But it's this really progressive school system that teaches a very progressive agenda, I would say, that has said to us, come do this thing for us, which is really remarkable. And it's given us this great outreach into the community and to the school, and given us access to so many people now. And it's just how the Lord has given us favor into the community, I think.
So it's really cool to see how, as we've served the community, we've seen people far from Christ come to Christ. I want to take just the last few minutes and show you some pictures of some people and and I'm just going to tell a little bit of their baptism story. So if you'll throw those up, I'm going to kind of go out of order. And so actually I'll go in order on this one. On the far left, that guy's a Texas Longhorn fan. So he's having a bad morning. But years ago, you see that's a faithful father. His name's Gary Sykes. He's an awesome man. I love him. I've coached football with him. He's been one of my partners in coaching football. That's his son, Nixon, and he's baptizing his son. So I would tell you, of our baptism we've seen, about 25% have been kids, and about 25% have been students in that 6th through 12th category. And many times we're seeing godly families who are like, hey, there's a church that preaches the gospel. We've moved into town. We want to go to that. Baptize their sons. And so that's about 50% of our baptisms are in our kids and student ministries. The next, you'll see Buddy there, and you'll see a young lady. Her name's Kayla. Kayla's been here. Kayla was getting married that day, the day that she was baptized. She's getting married. And she's marrying, she's from Greeley, but living in Fort Collins, and she was marrying a young man named Garen Wood. Garen Wood is a graduate of Franklin County High School here. And matter of fact, he's a Kentucky State Patrol. I'm not sure if they're living in Richmond or what, but I know that they sometimes come here. And you'll see that's a really cool story. The next one, that's Brandon, our college pastor. That young man's name's Dylan West. Dylan went to college and rebelled. You see, Dylan was raised in an atheist home, but a moral home, a good home. If you look at his college resume and his transcripts and his GPA score and all the things, all the clubs that he had accomplished, they were all great things, except he didn't have Jesus. And so when he got to college, on his first day at college, he meets somebody from our team that invites him to do something. He's like, sure, I'll go do that. His first Sunday at church, this very moral kid goes, this is the first time I've ever been to church. And Dylan's rebellion looked like, hey, I'm not going to be an atheist. I'm going to follow Jesus. And he was baptized. It was funny. He waited. His parents did not want him to get baptized. He said, I'm going to get baptized. I'd like for you to be there, but I'm going to do it whether you like it or not. He's a rebel. And he had this robotics competition where they had made these robots, and his parents came in town for it. So he said, I want to get baptized the day after that, and I'll get them to church to hear the gospel. So that's really cool. That's like, not most of our college students aren't that, by the way. Most of them are like, I've partied, I've tried it, it didn't work. I need something else. I need Jesus. Now go ahead and throw up the next picture, and I'm going to start right here with Don Kiesel. Don's from South Carolina. That's his wife, Robin. She's from Pennsylvania. Don has an incredibly wild story, military story, but basically gets discharged, DUIs, drugs, all that stuff, ends up homeless. Somewhere along the way, Robin brings him in and kicks his butt and gets him beat into shape. They kind of get it together, but there's still no Christ. Robin worked for one of our members who owns an auto mechanic shop, and she's actually the general manager of the auto mechanic shop. And I built a relationship with her coming in, talking with her. Ross is encouraging her to come to church, and next thing you know, Ross is sharing the gospel. Ross, one of our church people, is being super faithful with Don and Robin. Next thing you know, he's got them coming to church, and they both come to Christ. Now, talk about Robin for a second.
Robin is just a real student of the Word. The Lord has definitely, He saved her, and any opportunity she has to study the Word, she does. Any Bible study that's available, and I've seen her grow in her knowledge of the Word and her love for the Lord.
She came to your Bible study, did an inductive Bible study, learned how to study the Bible.
But just continues
But now, and she's just eating it up, and she's teaching others.
Yes.
A few Sundays ago, a few months ago, I'm in the lodge, and a girl walks up to me who's never been to church before. This was literally her second time in church. She went to a Lutheran church. No one talked to her. She literally pulled up in a vehicle. Her company's Two Witches and a Broom. It's a cleaning company. She came out of a Wiccan witch lifestyle, and she meets me and says, I believe that God brought me here this morning, and starts unloading on me. Robin hears it, steps in, takes her. Robin starts meeting with her for coffee once a week. Robin leads her to the Lord, and now Amber's been baptized and is being discipled by Robin. So those two, they went through our servant leadership cohort. They serve and serve and serve. Any food that we do for college students, they do it. They just are. I guess that's not true, but they do a ton of food.
They're just real servants.
And ton of cooking in our church. I'm going to move over one picture. You see Buddy. This guy's name's AJ Mondello. AJ and his wife Medasia show up at a Christmas Eve service in 2020. So, nope, 2019. 2019, right before the pandemic. And I meet with he and his wife, and basically afterwards he tells me, we're addicted to drugs. We're both actively using cocaine. They're married, and it's a mess. And so I share the gospel with them, and they run. They don't come back to church. They don't. They're gone. After the pandemic, some point, I think it was probably into 21, beginning of 22. AJ shows back up at church, and something's wrong. He's broken. And what happened is his wife has cheated on him, and she's left him, and she's abandoned him, and she's run off. And so Buddy then goes and takes kind of AJ under his wing, shares the gospel with AJ. Again, AJ comes to Christ. Buddy begins to disciple him. Eventually, Medasia divorces him, and he just kind of waited around. And anyway, we began to see AJ really grow in his faith, be discipled. Now, AJ is in Durango, and he runs their setup and teardown team. And he's one of their key members, and he's just doing so well. And so to think, this was the dude that came addicted to cocaine, now is the setup and teardown person in Durango. Really, really cool story. And then the last picture there is Donnie. Donnie and Jenny. And Donnie's a mess. He's a mess today. He's a mess today, but he's a saved mess today. And the Lord is transforming and working in Donnie and Jenny in an incredible way. And Donnie, again, his mom and dad lived in an apartment down the road from the church. And they decide to come. And Donnie literally was a Satan worshiper. He literally has Satan like the goat head tattoo. he was just in this super, super dark spirituality. And he comes to church. He's not married to Jenny. Matter of fact, he's married to somebody else when he gets there. And again, they hear the gospel. I meet with them. His divorce is finished. I keep meeting with him. I meet with him. He has been arrested. And he got to a point where he was just so broken and so desperate that he finally gave his life to Christ. And it continues to get in trouble. You know, he got arrested for DUI, and I had to go to court with him. I actually drove, he and his wife. It was in Rocky Mountain National Park, so it was federal. And so I had to go to the federal courthouse and take him to the courthouse and all this stuff. And so many of you guys have seen that our building, it used to like be kind of like, we remodeled the inside of our building, but the outside was like pretty ugly. And then it got painted and it looked pretty. Well, Donnie is a painter by profession. He painted our church building for free, except kind of not. It was his community service hours.
Yeah. But it worked out.
It looks great.
I mean,
it looks
killed
great.
two birds with one stone.
And Donnie and Jenny moved to Indianapolis. And
They're in church.
They're in church, and they're, you know, where they, you know, he posts stuff like, the other night it was at a Christian concert, and he was like, I used to go worship Satan, and now I go worship Christ.
It's a journey.
And it's because you planted the gospel in a manner worthy of God.
That's right.
And so I just want to share these stories with you and just tell you thank you. Thank you. So, Father, I thank you for Buck Run Baptist Church and its over 200 years of faithfulness. Thank you for these people and their heart for you, and that they're willing to do hard things, and that they're willing to sacrifice things of their personal life in order to bring you glory, that your name may be known. Lord, I pray that you do an incredible work at this church, and that you continue to use this church to be a beacon of light in a dark world, and that you would use them to change Frankfort, that Frankfort would continue to see people come to Christ in revival, to central Kentucky, to the state of Kentucky, across North America, particularly their investment in Colorado, and Father, even to the very ends of the earth. And so, Lord, use them and bless them. In Jesus' name, amen.